Among countless notable achievements in exploration, 5 firsts achieved by our members define the legacy of the Explorers Club. 1909, the North Pole. 1911, the South Pole. 1953, the highest point on Earth, summiting Mount Everest. 1960, the lowest point on Earth, the Marianas Trench. 1969, the surface of the Moon, the Apollo 11 mission. The club's founding mission, to promote exploration by all means possible, remains our driving force. Headquartered in New York City with a community of chapters around the world, the Explorers Club supports scientific expeditions of all disciplines and unites our members in the bonds of good fellowship. Historic flags are carried on our most distinguished expeditions. Our members are storytellers and changemakers. We are driven by the instinct to explore, forge new frontiers, and push boundaries for the scientific advancement of human knowledge. We are explorers. Together, Fjällräven and the Explorers Club inspire the world to walk with nature. Join us each month for a thought-provoking and exciting new episode featuring explorers from around the world as they share their work and stories from the field. Our goal is to push the boundaries of curiosity, explore the wild around us, and inspire new and seasoned explorers to discover nature in a new way. The sense of togetherness with nature has never been more crucial. This is the Explorers Club Fjällräven Speaker Series.
In my life, I've always been somehow tied to academia. And this was as an educator and a student, I was very tied to academia. Outside of my academic studies, I really love mountaineering expeditions and going to check out glaciers and going to the desert. And it took me years to realize that as an educator I was failing because I wasn't sharing all the things that I was learning outside of academia, and those were equally important. And the experience in nature that really set me on the course to become an educator outside of a curriculum was to bring a camera with me and travel with it. And it wasn't because I got to walk out with a photo and have a cool story and take these beautiful landscapes or go to the gram spots. It was because it changed how I interacted with the places I was visiting. And it helped me focus, and it helped me become more creative on how I communicate and how I traveled. And I think that really set the course for me to become a better educator.
The experience in nature that really set my course was when we were on Mount Everest. We were on an NSF-sponsored expedition studying climate change and seeing how it was affecting the snow and glaciers in the area. And an avalanche came and hit my team, killed one of my friends, and split our team in half. And that was when I really understood just how bad climate change was, how climbing no longer was safe. And if we want to understand our world, we have to find a way to do it safely. And but we still have to do it because it's critical that we understand what's happening as our world changes around us.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So we haven't really met in person, and they paired us up for this experience, and we've kind of gotten to know each other for the last few weeks. But for the sake, since we don't have a host or a mediator, we're going to sort of just be interviewing each other. So for the sake of the audience, just tell me who you are. What do you do?
Oh, a loaded question to begin. I guess at this point, I'll throw the video in just so everyone can sort of see kind of a background a little bit. So we'll have like a minute-long video.
Well, I'm pretty well I fell through that hole. Thankfully, I didn't keep falling that way. I got trapped here instead. This ledge, my arm I can't use. I'm gonna have to somehow climb out that way. Oh, I can't go that way at all. Thank God I stopped on this ledge. Oh. Oh. How do I get back up there though? Oh.
And so now that y'all have seen the video, basically at this point in my career, I'm a scientist and a expedition leader. Have led expeditions to 5 continents around the world, including Mount Everest, world's deepest caves, deserts, jungles. And the reason I guess we were asked to pair up with this was because as a longtime member of search and rescue and having been involved in a lot of accidents like the one you just saw, I kind of have a visceral sense of the risk you put yourself in when you go out and try and research the world and experience the world in these exploratory sorts of ways. So I'm the executive director of the American Climber Science Program. I'm a lifetime fellow of the Explorers Club. I've gotten millions of dollars in grants from USAID and National Science Foundation and other groups to do research around the world, and have worked with students in Peruvian students, Nepali students, Costa Rican students, really trying to expand the outreach of knowledge and exploration around the world.
Besides
All right,
losing your
Eylene, tell me about
mind,
yourself.
wait, hold on. Besides losing your mind, what are you doing now during COVID? I imagine that somebody who gets out a lot is probably a little bit desperate. What does this year look like for you?
This year has been really interesting because I've always believed that there's a lot of research that goes on in the United States. And so I've tended to work in other parts of the world because I thought there was more of a need there. Mm-hmm. In this case, we're stuck in the US, and it actually has been really nice because I've been able to, first of all, recover from a lot of the frostbite and other physical ailments that I've collected over the years.
It takes about 6 months to feel it again.
What's that?
It takes about 6 months to feel your feet
again.
Oh
yeah,
right?
It's so nice. You know, it's like, wow, that's what fingers feel like when they're working properly.
That's my left foot. Look at that. Yeah, it's great.
But yeah, so we've been working in Olympic National Park and sort of some of the more local areas so that we can keep working on doing science and staying fit while at the same time not exposing anyone to COVID or causing any sort of non-social, non-distancing.
Fair. That's fair.
So what about yourself? What have you been doing? Or who are you, first of all?
I'm Eylene Pirez. So I'm a Cuban immigrant, and I always plug that in just because I have a little bit of a different background. And I came to the US in 2001, in which I went to prison, but now I am a US citizen. So I've always wanted to be an astronaut. So my background is slightly different than almost all the explorers because my academic work really relies in astrophysics and physics. And I went to UCLA for my bachelor's in astrophysics, and then I worked for NASA's Cassini spacecraft, in which I, worked in the imaging subsystems, looking at possibility of life in some of the Saturn's moons. One of my favorites is the Enceladus flyby, where we got to see all these beautiful geysers, and it's just incredible activity. And then after that, I worked in dark matter detection. So a lot of my work has been making technologies, making the eyeball that can see at these different scales. And while doing all of that, I have missed a lot of Earth scale, visible light and what we have in front of us. When you spend so many years in academia, something, I don't know, there was something really missing. And even when
so
I
many
finished,
years in the lab, you just got to
right.
get out of the lab and experience the real world.
Yeah, and like the xenon tank where we work for dark matter, it was like underground in a cave. So it's like, okay, you know, at some point you become kind of anxious. And but also, like, I moved into particle physics afterwards, and I designed for graduate school. I went and worked on technologies to make things more energy efficient. And this is when I really got into climate change and things like that, just because I was making technologies that were closely connected with fighting the climate crisis. But, you know, the more you start looking at the sky and the more you have news, for example, like the Venus news that we just got about the possibility of life on Venus, the more you realize that what you have here on Earth is just extremely valuable. And I felt like throughout academia, I had missed this opportunity to really learn. And I finished school, and instead of feeling like I commenced my life, it felt like I had missed out on a lot of things. And one of my passions, because throughout school I was an educator as well, I wanted to really be able to bring this out into the public. There was all these fascinating things that are happening here on Earth that need to be explored. So, and it came from my need to complement my academic background, really, and that's when I started exploring. And I'm a kind of a one-woman crew, and as somebody who's worked in a lot of imaging and making eyeballs, I got a camera, and that's been a large focus of mine, is being able to document what's going on here on Earth. And I always look for places where science and culture sort of meet, whether it's in the top of a mountain or the desert. You know, I don't discriminate. I know they call us mountaineers, but I'm like, I love the desert. I love going to different places. So I think that there is something wonderful to learn everywhere. And what I do right now is I'm pretty much an educator. I work in science communication, but I also work in making, as an advisor for the California Climate Code and making sure that we become more energy efficient. So from that aspect, I have a boring desk job, and then I try to escape to the mountains as much as I can. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
But yeah.
So I guess
the big question is, why do you do what you do?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that really is. I mean, that was one of the reasons I put that video up as a way to start this, is because prior to that, I mean, when I first started my education, I got an international law degree. I looked at policy and realized policy wasn't informed by science. And then I went and started doing science, and it was very esoteric, and none of the science really makes it into the policy. And so that's why I tried to bridge that gap. But again, I kept doing it from an academic standpoint. But when you fall in a crevasse, when you basically die and somehow come back to life, survive when you shouldn't have, it gives kind of a new urgency to life, but it also makes you recognize how critical it is that things are done safely. So I've really, from that crevasse fall, transitioned into leading students out in the field, both American as well as students from other things, working with scientists who don't have any climbing skills. So I partner with the American Alpine Club, and that was how we formed the American Climber Science Program, was to allow scientists and then volunteer climbers as well as students to get out into the field and work. And at the end of the day, the reason I do what I do is because not many people can do this. Being able to climb at 8,000 meters while still collecting data, and having the background knowledge on to teach safety and make sure people can get into the field and get back out again alive, is a kind of a rare data set. So I keep pushing myself, because I recognize that life is short, and it's not just my life, it's all of our lives, and the environment's with climate change, the environment's life is, I don't want to say it's threatened, but it's
delicate.
It's delicate and being damaged in ways, and the longer we wait, the more pressing these issues will become. So trying to get people out there to find data, to begin mitigating the problems we're doing, and then finding ways to adapt to the changes that are occurring.
The changes that are occurring are so fast too. Like, I imagine that you're running into this where now, you know, before you used to have to put on crampons pretty much since you left base camp, and now sometimes you don't even put on crampons until summit day, which is just absolutely shocking. And then you're in this mixture of rock and loose ice all the time. It's very worrisome.
I'm the only person in history who's ever climbed Mount Everest without crampons on. And I did it specifically to see if, first of all, Mallory could have done it because he didn't have crampons back before they invented them. But then also if climate change had reduced the amount of snow to the point where you could get up without crampons on. And again, I'm the first and probably only person to ever do that because it's way easier with crampons on. But the fact is that on Mount Everest, the snow has retreated enough, the glaciers have retreated enough that first of all, it's killing people. It's, it's hit my teams a couple times. We've lost people, good friends, but also I could climb Mount Everest without crampons on.
Yeah, it's really worrisome. I love going to glaciers, and I've been seeing them just shrink to nothing in the past few years. It's extremely sad to see.
For sure. Well, so why do you do what you do?
So I feel like there's very few people in science who can go outside and work on science literacy. And I think that, science should be for all. Like I've seen a huge decline of science literacy in the country. And I think that adds to some of our climate problems, and the fact that we just don't use our resources correctly, that we are easily sold on what they call green technologies and things like that are really worrisome for the future of the human race. And as I saw this, also the lack of critical thinking that is going on in a lot of areas, and politics always comes in because science is affected enormously by politics, but science is not influencing politics enough, and critical thinking is not influencing politics enough. So I think I felt
now there's an anti-science bias on the top part of most politicians. It's not unfortunately a single party or a single person. It's the vast majority of politicians don't like science anymore. It tells them things they don't want to hear.
Feel like in a way that science world has become so closed off to the public, and I think that citizen science is crucial, and there aren't a lot of people who are going out there and saying, this is why we need to protect this. People are like, stop driving your car. Well, if they don't have a strong connection to the planet, if they don't even understand what you're trying to sell them, it's really difficult for people to take action. So for me, I felt an obligation as a scientist and an explorer to mix both of them, right? So I do work a lot with brands and how to kind of educate the public a little bit more. And if I were to leave a legacy for my life, if at the end of my life, if I can go out every day and learn a little bit more about the planet, but also pass a little bit of that wisdom so that it becomes something that people can take and be empowered and inspired to use our resources better and protect the earth, I think that really is what I feel like I'm here to do as a person, and that's why I do what I do. And I usually do it alone. I'm always really jealous of all these expedition teams, and I was like, I wish I could find a way to do this with more people, but I've always been so isolated, and I like to go and really mix with the locals. And in a way, I travel very differently because I do a lot of this mountaineering stuff by myself, which is, it's very dangerous to do these things by yourself because you have no safety line. And I guess we can now talk about some of the risks that come with all of that. But when you travel by yourself and you have to prepare to travel by yourself. If I get frostbite, so for example, I was trying to summit Aconcagua last year, and it was negative 40 on summit day in a terrible storm. And I was hypothermic, and I started making bad decisions. For example, I was just making bad decisions and I was not warming up, and I was too far into hypothermia. And then I constantly had to be, and I was filming a self show, which is very difficult because I'm also there filming, trying to get education for people. I was filming the science of high altitude and what it does to the body. And funny enough, I was just a
great exhibit.
I was gone, I was, on summit day, I skipped over this Japanese man who was just laying on the floor crying. And I was like, this is a really terrible summit day. And I still couldn't turn around, and it took me maybe until I got to a point where I was like, if I don't turn around, I don't think I have the ability to make the decision to keep going. Yep. And when you're by yourself, everything lies on your decisions. There's no one to blame. So, you know, I've had those kind of stuff happen to me, and I've had a big climbing accident years ago. But that being said, is like those risks you have to learn to do. And one of the reasons I do what I do is because I feel like I have the skills and the physical ability to get to places that I can create that connection with, you know, with the world and science. Yeah.
In terms of risks, so I've started out climbing, so but I don't have good pictures of climbing falls because you don't take a picture while you're falling.
Yeah.
So what I included was some pictures of when I began working in Africa. I worked in Africa for several years, and there's something there called the Big Five. And I always thought the Big Five, a lot of people just think the Big Five, like, you know, the lion, the leopard, the hippo, the elephant, they're like the prized hunting things, but they're also the prized wildlife views and everything else. And I always thought they were the prettiest or whatever else. And it turns out the reason they're called the Big Five is they're the five most likely to kill you. And so everyone sort of like elephants, you know, it's like, oh, elephants are so, you know, beautiful and they're hunted and everything else. But yeah, we would always take armed game guards with us when we were out collecting data in the field. And yeah, the elephants killed two of the guys. They were fully armed. They were shooting the elephants as the elephants were tearing them to pieces.
They're huge.
So it's one of those things where what seems like it should be a wonderful thing to take nice pictures of is in fact trying to kill you. And things like water buffalo and crocodile. And in Africa, I found out that no one knows how to swim, even though they live right next to rivers, because if you get into a river, something will eat you. And so growing up, no one ever learned how to swim. And so kind of having worked in Africa and suddenly encountered all these risks I didn't expect that terrified a lot of scientists and made that, you know, they quit working there. They just couldn't deal with it. And then as I moved into the higher mountains, and again, you saw the crevasse fall, avalanches have killed teammates and so forth. So the risk is kind of present but the payoff is we have to understand these environments. If we don't go to them, if we just ignore them because they're dangerous, then we don't see climate change kind of where it's really the rubber's hitting the road, where it's at its most critical. And so finding ways to safely do that is how we're going to move through and adapt to kind of this climate catastrophe that's looming. So
yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot of elements of risk, but you know, with someone with your training, or, you know, I've slowly built up my training. You know, I've also gotten very lucky in many ways because I think everyone who's alive who's done explorations has gotten lucky, because you don't have to be unlucky to die out there, you know, and that really is the key message of, you know, these expeditions and exploring these areas that require, you know, taking a big risk. And often you probably get, you're kind of a daredevil. You just kind of want to do an Evel Knievel stuff. Like you know, I feel the opposite. I feel like I am the most careful risk taker there is. And I train compulsively to avoid these things, especially being by myself. What does training kind of look like for you? What do you do with, I have a bigger question. What do you do with scientists? Because I know a lot of scientists who would just dive in 5 minutes in a mountain like this. So I think that, how do you deal with them?
That's the whole point of my program is when we come in, the nice thing about climbing especially is you have to acclimatize. And so when you go into a valley and you're spending those first days acclimatizing, we first of all collect data, so water quality and those sorts of things, but then we spend a huge amount of time, here's how you do crevasse rescue, and we practice crevasse rescue spread out in the valley, or we practice situational awareness and all these other things that are so critical for survival. Because at the end of the day, risks are going to be, you know, they're present everywhere. They're present when we drive, when we do anything. And the critical thing is being prepared for them, you know, taking a driver's ed class when you're learning how to drive, or in this case, taking, you know, you pretty much shouldn't go out into an expedition environment without having wilderness first aid or wilderness first responder, without having some sort of understanding of what you're going to do. You know, and for a lot of people, their sole rescue kind of risk thing is, I got a sat phone and someone will come get me, and which is totally not an adequate answer, especially when you have fewer people or you're alone. And,
but also because helicopters,
choosing the right route, looking at the weather, and making sure you've got the knowledge and background and the tools to extricate yourself from most anything.
I know for me, has taken a lot of physical training to be able to carry all the gear myself on top of camera gear. And that to me is a big part of what I have to do. Is just, I have to be capable of carrying a lot of weight. And a lot of people have porters. I'm young and I don't have that much money. So I'm just like, I'm just gonna put in the work. I've never worked with a porter. But one of the things that you just mentioned, a lot of people rely on sat phones. Often the helicopter cannot go past base camp or camp 1. And most of the accidents happen after that, which means that if something happens to you in a higher camp, you still have to get back down. And I think that with, you know, one of the things that I kind of admire and terrified of doing something like you're doing is dealing with people who probably don't have the physical training to probably deal well with an injury and get themselves back down safely. So I think that's props to you for spending that time and helping the scientists and trying to get up and down safely.
Well, and the biggest problem with people who just rely on a sat phone and no training of their own is that they're putting the people who are rescuing them at risk. I had a really good friend, his wife's dad was a helicopter pilot in Chamonix, France, which is a huge climbing area.
Yeah.
And, you know, when she was in high school, he died during the rescue. And it turned out that the helicopter pilots in that area, none of them made it to retirement. It's just a very dangerous thing to go out and rescue somebody in really adverse conditions. Right. So you aren't just risking your own life when you're out there, you're risking the life of everyone else who has to try and take care of you. And so that's why, again, the better your preparation, the better you can avoid the adventure, the more likely, you know, the better it is for everybody involved. So.
And I have a question, and, you know, I think we've talked about this in several conversations before, but what makes you, like, what explorations have you had in your life that, you know, overcome the risk? You know, what rewards overcome that risk of going out there? And I know in terms of unexpected outcomes, I've had a lot of positive unexpected outcomes. It's just most people only remember the terrible things. I've had great explorations where I was like, I never thought I was going to learn this. This is amazing. So what kind of rewards have you had in your career that have made overcoming this risk and unexpected outcomes like absolutely worth it?
Well, like one example would be when we went from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean through the mountains of Nicaragua and Costa Rica. And cool. That area was closed back when Noriega was a big drug running, so back in the 80s, and no scientists, no one's been into the area. It's been utterly closed off. And so scientifically, we don't know how climate change was affecting it. And it was one of those deals where we put together a great team. I had a local woman, Rebecca Cole, and who's from the area. And I put together this team. We had a Navy SEAL medic. We had a lot of really hardcore people, small group of 6. And we just had everything dialed. All of our planning was done just to the right level, because we had to go in and we had to carry food and for like 15 days. So we were all starting out with over 100-pound packs on and carrying it up incredibly steep mountains and then down the other side in muddy, wet terrain, 100 degrees, 100% humidity. I guess someone,
Costa Rica, yeah.
Someone had started trying to do that earlier and had fallen and poked their eye out. And it had taken 3 days to get them somewhere that a helicopter could finally reach them. So we knew it was one of those things, once you go in, you either come out alive or you don't come out at all. And, but, you know, so it was huge amounts of risk, but we prepared everything we could possibly prepare. And we came out, we used all the bandages up at towards the end, we used duct tape. We would put a little toilet paper on it and duct tape it, and that was a bandage. But yeah, everything went great. And we have this trove now of knowledge of an area that no one has been in, like I said, in decades. And incredibly, incredibly rewarding. And
those jungles and mountains, because that's a lot of volcanic stuff, that area is extremely complicated to navigate. I have explored Costa Rica extensively. It's actually where I had my big climbing accident, which it's funny that Costa Rica, it seems like such a harmless country, but I know so many people who've gotten severely injured in Costa Rica, and it's not even a tall mountain. It's just the terrain is absolutely difficult to do.
Well, and we were lucky because we had a guy, he was like 65 or something, a local Indian from the area. And he had crossed the mountains a bunch with his dad back when he was a kid. And so he knew pretty much how we needed to go, but we had to basically just figure it all out and cut our way through. But it was crazy because we would come to like a river and be like, oh, here's where we're going to camp. And there'd be these giant avocado trees. And he's like, yeah, my dad planted that so that he would have food when he would come back and forth.
Smart.
Yeah, everything works out right. It's amazing how wonderful it can be.
And in terms of exploration, what's like your favorite area? I know that they put us here because we're mountaineers. Is there any like mountainous region that is close to you, especially just because of the scientific or exploration doors that is open for you?
Yeah, and that's an amazing question, and I'll ask you the same thing, because that is kind of the question: what means the most to us? And for me, there's so many beautiful places in the world. There's so many amazing scientific questions, and the reason I return to places is because of the local people, the stakeholders. Right. And it's not just that they're fun or nice or great; it's because they care about what you're doing. They're excited. They want to help. They want to learn, and they want to make their world a better place. And so, like when I worked in Africa, it's just the corruption is so endemic that nothing ever happened. People just mainly wanted bribes. They weren't interested in your data, or the few that were overwhelmed by the ones that weren't. Whereas in Peru and Nepal, where I've worked, just the opposite, especially Peru. They're excited. They want, the students are, they're fighting with each other to get out there and get into the mountains because they appreciate where they live and they want to protect it and make it a better place.
I think the Andes is my favorite like mountain region for so many reasons. It's one, no mountain costs $50,000 to climb, which is absolutely amazing. You can even go to the tallest peak there, 7,000 meters, and you don't pay nearly as much. Not only that, I speak Spanish, so I feel like the Andes has a special place for me because I'm the same way. I like to really bond with the locals. And especially because I'm usually by myself, having that pond of knowledge that I can be that and just kind of interact with different families, to stay with different families and sort of plan everything with locals, that to me is really special. And because I don't have a language barrier, I exploit the Andes. I'm always in the Andes.
Well, but you do, because do you speak Quechua? Because most of the people, Quechua is by far the first language and they barely speak Spanish.
I actually have gotten most people who speak Quechua, I can deal with very well.
Oh, nice.
One of my favorite expeditions that I've done was probably to Jujajaco, which is 6,700 meters, and it's the tallest archaeological site in the world. And I had done an interview with Johan Reinhardt, the National Geographic explorer who discovered the mummies back a few decades ago. And I went to the Salta Museum and met some of the scientists there who were testing the mummies, and I got to meet the mummies in person, which was just creepy. And because when you think of mummies, and I was completely ignorant of archaeology, and this is why this moment was so special to me scientifically, because I learned an entire area of science that I wasn't exposed to in academia. Again, I just had a whole that needed a lot more other sciences. And to me, a mummy was like this ancient Egyptian stuff wrapped in cloth, right? And this, when you're talking about, the Andes, when you have this extremely dry but mountainous region, they are not. They're just, is like looking at a child. And there were 3 kids. One was 6, one was 7, the other one was 14. And watching these mummies in person, and being able to see the hair on their arms, just everything about them was extremely creepy. They died 500 years ago, sitting at the top of this mountain. And I went and I climbed this mountain, and the people at the bottom of that region were extremely superstitious. And I think I crossed some boundaries there, mostly because to them, that place was sacred, and I feel like a lot of the scientists who've gone there, we've crossed a lot of boundaries in going into the sacred, high altitude shrines. But I was dying to see because the story of this kids getting to the top of the mountain is that they went there towards, a sacrificial ceremony called Capacocha, all of them speak Quechua in the region, so they're all extremely superstitious about this Cabacocha, and they offer the children to the gods to prevent epidemics and natural disasters, or an offering because of a king, or, you know, a lot of things that we're so far away from at this point. But it happened 500 years ago, and these mummies look intact. Like, it was like watching a kid. And they also, I could see the shoes that they wore to the top of the mountain, and there were this, you know, vegetable made sandals, and I am in crampons. I just crossed the field of penitentes, I crossed the glacier, and I was mind blown. And that's like to me, that's one of those really unexpected, you know, lessons I had.
And I
it
had
made
the
it
same
so
thing in
worth it.
Nepal. I had the same thing in Nepal today, because I was taking students into the field, and I told them, well, you guys, here's some money. You need to buy some leather shoes to for the trip. And they all bought dress shoes, because they were like, well, you know, how often am I going to use boots? But I'll need dress shoes. And so they wore the dress shoes on the glaciers and just wrapped them in rope. And
I hope you have a photo of that. That is amazing.
Yeah, it was just like, okay, you know, I've got big boots on and everything. I'm super warm, and they just didn't have a problem with it. So
it's unbelievable. I think we've definitely gotten spoiled. Like, the more you're in the mountains, the more spoiled you get with gear. Now we go, everything is ultralight, is super convenient. I know in Africa was a little harder for me, but I had a really, now that you talked about Africa, I had a really meaningful experience in Africa. I went on to explore the Sahara Desert with a Berber nomadic tribe, and that was really special. I spent the first few days with the women working in the oasis, and it's unbelievable what they have figured out what to do with their resources. It also made me realize that the reason, you know, the US is only 4% of the population of the world, yet we consume so much more, is because we don't have the patience and strength any longer that some of these ancient cultures have. You know, they've been around since 10,000, you know, before Christ. So like they've been around for a long time. They've evolved a lot in the Northern Sahara, and they have these techniques for agriculture and practically working with just sand dune. They can feed themselves. That to me was unbelievable. And being really resourceful without technology. You know, I was just working with the women in the oasis, and that was really meaningful. And then the men took me out into the desert for looking for trade, and we got to meet some of the guys in the Berber tribes that are doing mining, like illegal mining and all of that. I have some photos of that showing, that should come up. And that to me was, when astronomically was a gift to be in the Sahara Desert and look at that sky, but just culturally was absolutely fascinating. And I think that's probably the only experience I've had in Africa where I felt really close to the people, because it's not the same thing as in the Andes where I have that connection instantly. It took me a second, and I think that's the only really connection I've had in Africa, unfortunately, because Africa is an incredible continent, and I just don't feel like I know how to navigate it well. So.
Well, and I think what we're touching on as we were going through all these different examples is, I mean, that's one of the most critical things that we get out of exploration is the more places you go to, the more different ways in which people adapt to their environment and potential ways we can adapt to future climate changes. You know, that's the only way you see and understand these things. You know, because if you live in Iowa and start talking about how to adapt to climate change, you just you haven't seen how other people have dealt with it. And it's not just in the last 10 years or whatever. Like you said, it's for millennia. People in Tibet have been dealing with, you know, cold temperatures. People in the Sahara have been dealing with hot temperatures. So as climate fluctuates more and more, there's all sorts of adaptation mechanisms and cultural adaptations out there. And it's a question of us going out there, working with the local people, studying the science of what's the driving to make them change, and then how they're responding. But yeah, there's so many times that they respond by going back to practices that they had 300 years ago because they were resilient.
I know this sounds very awkward for a scientist to say, especially one that works in technology like me. But I feel like I have learned more about how to use our resources from going to these places and getting to know different cultures and getting to know different ecosystems really well than from making technologies here that make it easier. I feel like making technologies here has kind of separated us so much from having a connection with the earth that we no longer know how to use our resources or have the skills to use our resources. So like actually exploring outside of that, of technology and academia has really, I think, has taught me that there are so many other ways in which we could be using human hands and very simple tools to actually use our resources much better. And I think that's a big lesson for me for exploration. That was really what made me want to be an advocate for example, I work now with Fjällräven as an advocate for climate change and other brands. And I think that really was what opened my eyes, you know?
Well, and at the end of the day, just to kind of, as we're running out of time, thinking about how people can get involved and so forth, I think it's critical that people do get involved. And so I've put some links that they'll plug in. But what I always recommend when I have a student who's like, how can I learn about how to stay safe? How can I learn about how to get out there? And I always tell them, work for search and rescue. I mean, you're helping other people, you're contributing, you know, in a positive way, and they teach you everything you need to know. You get all this incredible free training. But by both helping, so it benefits you and it benefits everybody else. So it's a total win-win situation. And there's search and rescue pretty much anywhere you go around the country. And so I put a couple links for that. I put some training links because, like we've mentioned, if you're not incredibly fit, everything you do becomes far more difficult. When you get to 6,000 meters, if you're stumbling, if your blood sugar's low, you're about to die just because you're out of shape, then you can't be safe, you can't collect data, and you
can enjoy it.
Everyone else.
Yeah.
And then the last set of things I put was a couple of links to things like Earthwatch and the American Climate Science Program. So this is where people who are interested in learning more skills, who don't necessarily have the science knowledge, but have the time and the excitement to do it, you can get involved in projects that other groups have put together. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's, you know, children get outside less and less. You know, there's all these nature deficit disorder diagnoses and so forth. And so, you know, figuring out how we can be safer and how we can encourage the next generation, how we can teach, how we can lead good examples, and how we can facilitate them getting out there is what's totally critical. And so hopefully some of these links will be helpful for that.
And I wanted to add, you know, you're the best person to go to for that kind of outdoor training. In terms of what places to go, I think a lot of people spend a lot of money and effort in Googling best places to go to, blah, blah, blah. And I highly encourage you to discard that. You're just going to be in crowds. You're going to spend a lot of money traveling. One of my favorite resources is the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And they have all these activities and that come with in-depth research of why these places are important scientifically, technology, and culturally. And I really encourage you that don't pick a place just because it's pretty. The beauty of getting to know a different culture and the beauty of getting to know something that's really useful for the planet is a far better experience. So if you're trying to find inspirations of where to go, or, you know, go through the UNESCO World Heritage Site and find some of these places that we have here on Earth that are often they're not explored. And I think that can lead you, that will send you into a rabbit hole of research, but it will also lead you into learning a ton of things about our planet. And I think that's really the first step of exploration. Go somewhere with a desire to learn and a desire to really be there. So.
Yeah, and the desire to make a difference, because, you know, it's really easy, you know, kind of the selfish, I'm just going to go climb this mountain, or I'm just going to go hike this backpack, but it's not, like I said, it's not contributing anything. It's not making the world a better place. So
it's not even making you a better person. Right? And like, even if it comes from like making you a better person, and sometimes like self-knowledge is really important. Like if you just get to the top of a hike and you open your arms and take a selfie, that's probably not going to be a great experience for you. Like if you can find something that you can connect to, that you can pass on to your kids, that you can pass on to your friends, that you can, you know, that inspires you to learn something new, like walk every day, just go back home knowing a little bit more about Earth. I think that is a motto to do exploration.
ask yourself anytime you do something, is this meaningful? Is this I saw in a movie one time, they said every day is a piece of gold in your hand, and you can use it or drop it or, let it go away. And so recognizing the value in what you're doing, and again, is it meaningful in some way? So
yeah, I think we're running out of time here.
I hadn't really thought about how to say goodbye with this. So you go first, ladies first.
Ladies first. Okay, well, I hope that helped some people to inspire. I have a website, and if anyone wants to reach out to me, I am more than happy to talk to you about it. I am also 5 months pregnant, and I have been thinking a lot about working towards kids. So if you have kids and you want to explore more with kids, please send me a message. I have been doing tons of research, and I will be happy to help you both scientifically to find places that are interesting, and to point you at some of the links that John sent you, so that you can be physically strong to take on the exploration. So what about you? Do you have something to say?
Well, I guess similar sort of thing. It's at the end of the day, everyone can make a difference. Everyone can be involved. Like I've got a website as well where I talk about a lot of these things. You have links for people. American Alpine Club, and of course, the Explorers Club is the preeminent world organization for this type of activity. And then smaller groups, like I said, like Earthwatch, like the American Climber Science Program. But at the end of the day, if you're making a difference, everything you do is meaningful, and you're prepared physically and in terms of safety wise to get out there, then you almost always can make a difference. And so, get out there and do it. Yeah.
Don't let academia stop you. Okay, John, it was lovely talking to you.
Yes, you as well.
Hopefully we can chat soon. Thanks. All right.
Hello, my name is Amanda Haddock, and state parks have had the biggest impact on me as far as conservation and exploration. I used to travel to different Virginia state parks with my parents growing up, and I continued to volunteer at my local state park throughout high school and college. And now that I've graduated, I'm serving full-time with AmeriCorps at a Maine state park. I think what draws me so much to these state parks is that they're so accessible and inclusive, and I feel very safe in them, and I never feel out of place there.
Making eye contact with marine wildlife has changed my life. These are moments that cross the language barrier. They're fleeting moments of connection between beings, and I think they've helped fuel my feeling of responsibility to protect nature and to protect the ocean.